Well, it's not going to be an undefeated season for the Wisconsin Badgers. Let's talk about the good and the bad. There's some of both as the Badgers fall to the Wolverines Big Ten opener.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers. Good, bad, or indifferent. We are always here as a community. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings. That is our guy, Rajiv, over there. And listen, we're also pretty close to NSD. So we have basketball to react to, National Signing Day tomorrow. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Start your bet with a $5 bet. You get started with $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. How's it feel? We are not going to go undefeated, Rajiv.
I guess not. I mean, more importantly, we're 0-1 in conference already. That's not where we want to be. But look, I mean, it's an unfortunate night. This is kind of the thing that happens when you're not shooting the three. Tonje just kind of got, although we had a good game, there were times where he got stopped up. Crowell and Winter were just flat out dominated, frankly, the entire game. Obviously, Crowell being in foul trouble was not helpful. There was a lot of things that just kind of went wrong. Ultimately, I think this game shows that we have limitations. And that's clear. However, it's about how we can overcome those limitations. We've done that for the most part in other games. Klesmit shooting the way that he did tonight is not going to help overcome that. Winter playing defense the way that he did tonight is not going to overcome that. Having 5 block shots by the other team's best player, like these things are going to happen. I was really hoping to come on the show and say, wow, this is a gritty win. It's grinded it out. And it didn't work, but like you and I've said many times, Ryan, like if a couple bounces go the other way, we're celebrating a big victory here. We're not as good as we would have said we were if we would have won this game, and we're not as bad as we are going to talk about now just because we lost it. Like it's a close game. Close games happen. The important thing for me, big picture, is like I like this team still. I like the way we're playing. I think it's more fun to watch this team this year than it was last year. And there's a lot of things we'll get into that went wrong. But like for the most part, I feel like these things are going to happen. It's how you fight. I liked some of the things that I saw out there from a fight perspective and effort perspective. And hopefully we can make some improvements going forward. But I still like this team.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. This is a 3-point loss to, let's give Michigan some credit. This is a good Michigan team. Yeah. Really well coached Michigan team. Those twin 7-footers are going to give a lot of people trouble. It's not just Wisconsin. I got a newsflash for you. There's going to give a lot of teams trouble. You're going to drop some close games. It doesn't mean the sky's falling. Fisherman down below says that was a good game. It was a really good game. That was a really good Big Ten game. Now, you got to win your share of close ones. This team's going to have to prove they can do that. We're too early in the season to really know one way or the other. Really good game. Let's start with positives. I want to start with some positives here. I thought that stretch where Blackwell in the second half, three offensive rebounds in a row, scored 6 straight, had another pull-up jumper. You really see like the versatility of a guy like Blackwell, right? Driving to the paint, leading the fast break, getting on the glass. How many rebounds did Blackwell end up with today? 9 boards, playing really good defense. Here's the other thing, Rajit. As I was watching this game, one thing that popped in my head, because you remember how often we talked about, man, I don't know about the point guard spot in this team. Blackwell and Tonje are great passers. It's part of the reason you don't need a traditional point guard on this team. Those guys, some of the passes they made after penetrating the paint, and I know Blackwell had a turnover, or Tonje or Blackwell, I forget, it was Tonje had a turnover on a fast break, but they make high-level passes. Very, very impressed with both those guys. Continue to think we have one of the best 1-2 combos in the Big Ten with Blackwell and Tonje.
Yeah, I mean, those guys are fantastic. And one of the things that both of those guys do really well, and now, not so much in the second half, Tonje tried, but they were really trying to shut him down a little bit there, was like, we're not taking, as I call Chucky Hepburn style, late shot clock shots. Now, we did again in the second half, but in the first half, you kind of saw what this team likes to do, which is attack the rim late in shot clocks. Tonje does it, Blackwell does it, McGee does it, and I really appreciate that. And I think that's one of those positives where we're like, this is different from last year. Last year, we were putting it in Chucky's hands and just hoping something good happened, or putting it in Storr's hands. Well, now we're actually trying to create late in shot clocks. Now, again, with the caveat, second half, that didn't really happen at the end of the game. The other thing I'm going to say is we talk a lot about a certain guy on this podcast or on any Wisconsin show, and he deserves some credit, and it's Carter Gilmore. Carter Gilmore fights really, really hard. And we do talk about that. We give him a lot of credit for effort, but man, I feel like he was just everywhere tonight. He was doing all the little things. He was playing, trying to play tough defense. He was getting rebounds. yes, some of the threes, like I don't mind him taking them. Like when you're wide open like that, he's made a couple. It's okay. He's not. He can't take like Max Klesmit number of shots, which he shouldn't have done either.
I was gonna say Max can't do that either.
Right. But I mean, I really like Gilmore's effort. I think that he's a positive. I just feel like I really like what he's doing this year. He's developing, he's growing, he's being a bigger contributor to this team than he was last year. So I give him credit. It's another positive for me.
Yeah, let's shift maybe in this first segment to some of the things that maybe weren't great, right? I want to start with this one. There's a couple that I'm frustrated by. I'm going to start with one. We'll go yo-yo this back and forth. Tonje and Blackwell need help. Tonje and Blackwell need some offensive help. Klesmit shot poorly. This was a really bad Steven Crowell game. I'm on here often telling people, hey, lay off Steven Crowell. He got dominated in this game. And even though he's not a physical big, it has to be better than this. Like, you can't just say, oh, I'm not a physical big. That means I'm going to get completely dominated. Him and Winter got dominated. Amos played 6 minutes, right? You're not going to win consistently in the Big Ten if you're getting everything from Blackwell and Tonje. And you saw it in portions of the game. They started going just iso ball because there was nothing else happening. So the rest of the team needs to come along. You're going to struggle winning games if it's just Tonje and Blackwell, and the bigs got dominated. They got absolutely bullied in this game, and that's not good enough effort. That's not strong enough effort.
It's not. And specifically on that point, one of the things that really bothered me was Steven Crowell just doesn't want to shoot threes as much anymore. And I know he's 2 for 9 or 2 for 10 this season, but man, when you're wide open at the top of the key, you need to shoot that ball, because there were times where he was passing it up and then we were getting a worse shot. And I'm like, but you've got to take those shots, because as to your point, those guys need help. If he hits one of those threes, what kind of rhythm does that put him in? What kind of mindset does that put him in? And I think we needed more of that. So he's got to be better at those situations. Defensively, my goodness, there were times where it was bad. But look, I do have to say, like, I know there's some people, a couple of things saying like, Michigan's not that good. Michigan is pretty good. These two guys are insane. Danny Wolf is the real deal. Like, he is really, really impressive. And their other guy, Golden, like, they've got good players. I really wish Juwan Howard was still coaching this team, because this team would be much worse if Juwan Howard coached it. But so credit there to them. But yeah, defensively, man, it just seems like we were just constantly bodied up, down low. There's really not much we can do, but that's kind of who we are. We know that's who we are. So we have to, through coaching, we got to get better at how we're playing certain things. Like certainly the big pick and roll. Like Robbie Hummel talked about that constantly throughout the game. I like the hedging on some of the pick and rolls, but then there's no help back behind on certain situations. Like, we've got to get better about the team defense, especially with that pick and roll, which is constantly something that we're talking about. But yeah, I mean, ultimately the bigs just kind of failed us in this game.
Yeah. And the bigs don't have to win this battle, but they have to be more present. They have to be more physical. They have to make it a little harder. Brian Axton says JB and Tonje plus one other guy, whoever it is that night, could be a winning formula. You need somebody else. I'll also say this, there's going to be nights you don't shoot well from three. We can talk about Max Klesmit. Maybe we get into him now. I'm going to continue to be real with y'all. I don't mind most of Max Klesmit's shots. I still think he's a streaky shooter. He's going to shoot you out of some, shoot you into some. The couple at the end of the game is where I started to get frustrated, because there was a 3-minute stretch and a half, 3.5-minute stretch at the end. Klesmit hasn't been shooting well. That's not the time with Blackwell and Tonje and the way they played all year and all game. That's not the time to try to shoot out of a slump. He had that contested shot in the mid-range. You got to execute better offense there. Whether that's Greg Gard taking a timeout, or whether that's just Max Klesmit being the veteran, pulling it back out and saying, I got to get the ball to Tonje. I think we lost it offensively down the stretch, because I don't think we're going to be a team that's going to win defensively. We have to continue executing our offense to win this year.
Totally. And this was the first game that we saw like sort of the old school Badger scoring drought that kind of plagued us at times in several years in the past. So one of the things that bothered me was that I wanted to see Amos a little more. You and I were texting about this during the game. I think that I wrote the same thing down. It's like, well, Amos is a stretch forward that provides a little bit more offensively. Put him in the game and try to just wake things up offensively. If Blackwell and Tonje can't really get there, they're being covered really well, and no one else is scoring, then you're going to have to put someone else on the floor. So I would have liked to see a little bit more rotation change. To be honest, the first half, I like what Greg Gard was doing from a rotation perspective. The second half, though, is where I'm like, well, now we're seeing things we haven't seen yet. We're seeing offensive struggles we haven't seen yet. So that adversity's there. It's how we react to that adversity. Didn't really think Greg Gard handled that very well. And hoping that we got to use Amos. We brought him in for a reason. Like, let's put him in there and see what he can do offensively.
Funnily, immediately after you mentioned that, Skylar said, so glad Amos didn't play in the second half. So varying opinions. I will say this, the offense that we have predicated our offseason around, the idea of spacing, it doesn't work if Winter and Crowell can't shoot, because suddenly their guys back off and then you don't have the spacing you thought. And that's where I thought Amos would have been helpful. If Crowell is not shooting and Winter's kind of stopped shooting, you need a spacer. We're going back to what we did last year, where suddenly they're not respecting the offense and they're clogging the middle. And that makes it so hard for Tonje and Blackwell, who feast when you can space the court and then they get downhill. So I think that's where you could have gone Amos. Or more minutes. Janicki, more Janicki minutes, baby.
Janicki was the other one, Janicki and Amos. But that's exactly back to my original point. Crowell, you have to shoot that. Like we talk a lot about things where like, that's what Crowell is and some of his post stuff, but his ability to shoot, like he needs to do that. Period. End of discussion. When you're open, you need to shoot.
Agreed. All right, we're going to take a quick second here for our friends of the show. Then we're going to come back and talk about really quick. We're going to shift because it's been breaking all over the place. Some football transfers. Let's talk about the fact that we don't have a secondary anymore. I mean, that'll be fun. Let's talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. Rajiv, if you see any comments in here to star up, let me know, or just star them up. We'll get some more of your comments after this as well. A quick break for our friends of the show next. Today's episode brought to you by our great friends over at Gametime. Gametime is your number one source for all your ticket needs. Whatever you got to do from an entertainment standpoint, man, if you're into European art theater, go get those tickets on Gametime. Whatever it is, we're going to get tickets to the Kohl Center this year on Gametime. We're going to have a good event. We're going to have fun. Hopefully we get a home Big Ten win out of it, but we're going to do that on Gametime with the best prices, the best tickets, the best selection, the biggest inventory, flash sales, the cheapest stuff. I was out of breath there. It's also holiday season. It's a great time to go get gifts for somebody over on Gametime. Get them tickets to something. Unlock adventure in their lives. Like you be the champion of Christmas. Don't give socks or wool mittens or whatever it is. Go give them tickets to the events that they want to go to. Snag the tickets without the stress over at Gametime. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. You can create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off over at Gametime. All right, let's jump back into this. Let's start here with you. I mean, we're going to still do mostly just all basketball here, but we do want to just hit Austin Brown portal, Jace Arnold portal, Doak Luna portal, Snowden portal. Who am I missing? I'm missing somebody still, right? This is off the top of my head. Was there another DB that
Ray,
left?
did you say more?
I said more.
I think you got it already.
Okay. That leaves like Rico, Lucas, Agard, Jay Harper, who I'm still a little not fully sure of either. Thoughts on the recent portal losses?
I mean, it begs the question, what's going on in the room? I mean, there's obviously been, you saw some of the comments that were made about Paul Haynes. And I wonder what's happening there. It certainly gives me some cause for pause that it's, and Justin texted this earlier, it's a lot of defense guys that are all of a sudden just leaving. And that's not something you want to see. Whether it was the fact that Xavier Lucas jumped everybody, which, he's good and he probably deserves that and that's fine. But man, like it is bad. The thing about the transfer portal is it sucks to lose people. Remember how we felt when we lost Chucky last year? Like when you lose certain guys, you're pretty bummed out about it. In the end, though, everybody's losing these guys. Like it's happening to everyone. If you look at transfer portal on 247, anywhere you look, it's happening all over the place. It's just a part of college football. It's a part of college football that I frankly hate right now. I absolutely despise that you have to just recruit your entire team every year. So I'm hoping that we get something else that we can backfill with people. We're losing them. We're going to have to get people in the portal. It's not good for anything. It's not good for football. It's not good at all. It does concern me because remember the secondary was kind of the strength of our defense. And technically some of those guys are still going to be there. Obviously Wooler's going to leave and the safeties are going to be new. But I mean, I'm hoping and just kind of hopeful that we're going to be able to get replacements for these guys. But at the end of the day, I do sort of wonder what is going on in the secondary. Is it Grinch, Haynes? Is there issues coaching? Like that does concern me because when an entire position group leaves, you got to ask the question.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's probably some just honesty too. It's funny when players leave, you usually hear the player side. You never really hear anything else. It's very possible some real conversations were had and said, hey, some of you guys probably aren't in the plans. There's probably some honest conversations happening. It doesn't necessarily mean the sky is falling. I also don't want to downplay. Like I think Moore's a real hit. I thought he's a talented player. I think he was probably in line to be a starter next year. Like I don't want to just minimize that. But to your point, I think it's really, really, really intelligent and on point. It's happening everywhere. Every team is losing guys, and every team is losing guys from last year's class. Every team's going to lose a couple guys that they don't want to lose. these players, it's really easy to see greener grass somewhere. And it's not always the case, but it's so easy now to leave. And there's so much money in the portal. And it's just going to happen. And I agree with you. I hate this version of college football. I don't like it. I can't wait till it changes. I can't wait till there's more permanence. But until then, it is what it is. And by the way, when the portal opens, the Badgers are going to bring in 10 to 15 people from other schools that have done the same thing. I hope we hit at a higher clip than we have in recent years, but it's just kind of the wheel. It is what it is.
Yeah, there was a comment that I just wanted to start. Will Hanna says, sorry, Reggie, what happened in the secondary is not common, even in this era. There is a problem. Yeah, I would tend to agree with you, Will. I think that when it's a little more spread out, it's fine, which it did. Like Kurt Neal leaving, that's a blow, but it's also okay. That's just going to happen. Like we're going to lose more. This is not the end of it for sure. We haven't even really scratched the surface offensively. Hopefully we don't lose some of these receivers, but yeah, it definitely points to there's an issue there, especially with the comments. Who was it that made those comments? Was it Snowden? I can't remember who the first one was.
Snowden talked about Haynes. Yeah.
Right. So like that certainly is cause for concern, but you're right. That's one side of it. You're not hearing the coach's side of it. So we don't really know what that is. Ultimately, we'll just have to see where it shakes out in the end. But it's like we're all going to react to when you lose as many players. But if you look at any other team, yeah, you're seeing it too. You're right, Will. Not all in the same position group, which is a concern. Easton Park said, have you heard the Badgers are in on Connor Weigman, the A&M quarterback? I actually had somebody text right before the show and say, hey, keep an eye here. Somebody who has some connection. So, yeah, that's interesting. Let's see what happens there. As the portal turns, screw those DBs. We got a quarterback, Reggie. Let's get excited again. This is the portal roller coaster. Can we get an offensive coordinator first, though, please? We need to understand what we're going to be running. I am worried, though, the whole portal discussion, I am worried about the offense. Like, this is mainly all defense, but we talked about guys like Vinny Anthony and Trench Kahuna and people that really could be like big future people for this team. And then we don't want to lose them. You talk about Jones and Dupree. Dupree probably is going to stay, but there's a lot of talent there that we really don't want to go anywhere. You don't want to just have all these recruits come in and then lose them all the next year to a portal and then load in new ones. Like you got to keep some of these guys. We're talking about what Fickell's seasons can look like in 26, 27, when he's been there for 3 or 4 years and these recruits been there for 3 or 4 years. But if they're not there, then you don't really have anybody to talk to, No. Well, and this only speaks to the fact of how important it is to start building. You either got to start building a winning culture and that vision, or it's not going to work ever. Because the only way you're going to get kids to buy in and stay is if you start competing. Like people don't want to. I'm sorry, losing 42-10 to Iowa was not fun, right? You have to start playing better, and it's going to be easier to keep these kids. It's going to be easier to sell the vision. We're talking. We already fired an offensive coordinator 2 years in, Rajiv, and now we're talking about maybe demoting the defensive coordinator. That's not conducive to keeping the talent that you internally recruited. Gosh, honestly, today, it's so bad because I really wanted to just celebrate basketball today, but with the loss now, it's like, it just really, it just highlights the fact that, man, Fickell's got to have a good year next year, man. This program is really on. You are looking at, December 2024, there's kind of like an inflection point here. We're going to look back at this time and which way does our program go? And there's a lot of people that think it's going to go this way, and there's people hoping it's going to go this way. And that it is a very difficult time. So Fickell's got to get ready. Strap in. This is not the end of it. We're going to lose more players. We're going to get more players. Hopefully we get a good OC. But what happens between now and August, this is really going to define what this program does. And then most importantly, what happens on the field next fall, it's got to be better than this year, man. It really has to be. Can I throw one thing out there? And then I want to get back to basketball. Our last segment will be all basketball because this is the team that's more exciting right now, quite frankly. I do want to point out one thing. So you've lost 4 DBs. You lost Curtis Neal. You have a couple people that are going to be bouncing. Leon Lowry. You could take all those guys off this roster. You could replace them all next year with better or similar talent. It won't change the win and loss record unless you fix quarterback. So, you're losing numbers. There's a good portion of Badger fans who don't even know who Jace Arnold is, who Amari Snowden is, who Jonas DeCluna is, I think people probably know who Braden Moore is and Lowry. A lot of people may not know who Cole LaCrue is. The bigger point is you got to fix the quarterback. And a lot of these other issues probably aren't quite as severe as maybe people make it out to be. I don't know if I'm wording that correctly, but you're losing reserve players. Totally. I said to you earlier today, I think it's quarterback and defensive line, specifically pass rush, or just like to tackles to stop the run. That's to me where Wisconsin and NIL need to open up the checkbook. And that's where you've got to focus. You've got to have a quarterback and you've got to have a D-line, because the way that this team was gashed at times on the ground is sickening to watch. I know all of you listening to this are sickened by what we saw sometimes defensively. That's not Wisconsin football. That has to change. And you can't do anything without a quarterback. So yeah, those are the two positions that I'm going to be laser focused on.
Yep, I 100% agree. All right, we're going to take one quick second for our friends of the show. Come back. We're going to finish talking basketball. I got a question for Rajiv and a question for you in the chat. Who are your top 4 basketball players on this team this year, right now, up to this point? Who are your top 4? We're going to talk about that next. And final thoughts on the Michigan loss coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at FanDuel. FanDuel is the #1 source, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network, the official sportsbook of the NFL, and the official sportsbook of Ryan. Not that that has as much sway as those other two, but you know me better than you know the NFL. Let's be real here. I haven't steered you wrong, have I? I don't think so. I'm thinking back to all our advertisers. They've all been great. I've always given you good advice. So if you want to follow the advice of Ryan, and if you want to maybe take some of Rajiv's good picks, because don't take my picks, just take my advice, go over to FanDuel, futures, parlay, spreads, teasers. It's all there. Great time. NFL playoffs coming up, NBA, obviously college basketball, college football playoffs are coming up. No dog in the race really, but a great time if you want to just get some fun betting action. Let's finish up here. Let's talk a little more basketball. And head over to FanDuel.com. First $5 bet gets you $150 in bonus bets guaranteed over at FanDuel.com. All right, Rajiv, hit me up with who are the top 4 in order. Your top, no, let's do 5 because it's a starting lineup. I don't know why I said 4. Who are your top 5 players right now in order?
Now 5 is even harder now because I had my 4 now.
Well, take your 4 and add 1.
Listen, 1, 2 is Tanjay Blackwell. So let's just get that out of the way. It's really the discussion starts after that. I'll tell you what, I got to go McGee 3 at this point. I just feel like McGee has really come on this year. Talk about just energy off the bench, the way he plays defense. Yeah, happy with that. And I'm going to still say Crowell 4 because I still think he's going to have a big part of this team, which I know there'll be discussions there about what happens with where Crowell fits into this. But I mean, after that, I think you got to go Winter, but there are certainly arguments to be made for Janicki. I mean, I would say Winter after that, but yeah, I mean, McGee definitely is my number 3. I think that's the difference for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's that exact order. It's Tanjay Blackwell, McGee in that order, Corral, who despite today's very poor performance has had some good performances this year. And then this is where I'm starting to get a little worried. Like, is this team not as deep as I thought? Like, if we're getting inconsistent Winter, and if Amos can't get more than 6 minutes, and I like Gilmore, but Gilmore is a 10-minute a game guy. Right, like you really don't want more than 10 a game from Gilmore. If Hunter's not really going to play, if Freetake's not really going to be a guy, this starts to suddenly look like a 6 to 7 man rotation.
Very quickly, and we saw that very early on. We're like, oh, all of a sudden, because yeah, I mean, remember when we did our rotation preseason, Freetag was in it 100%. We talked about Freetag being in it for both of us, and Hunter was. So you don't have that. You're all of a sudden missing, and then we're not seeing Greppy. Not to say that we should see Greppy, but like I think that there is some. You got to have some of that depth. And yeah, I mean, there's definitely some concern about how far this team goes down. I will say, again, I know that a lot of people disagree with me on this, but I think Gilmore has taken a bit of a step. So I like that in that depth piece. Mm-hmm. I agree with you. Shouldn't be playing more than 10, 15 minutes a game. But I think that provides some front court depth, which we don't really have. And hopefully, Amos can continue to sort of find his way onto this team and play a little better, because I think is a crucial part of this depth, and we're going to need that as the season progresses.
And I want to write off Klesman. A lot of people are kind of starting to dance by that grave a little too early. Like, he was a streaky shooter last year, and if you remember, midway through this season, we were doing the Klesman is going nuclear shows, right, for like a 3 or 4 game stretch. He's in a slump. But if you look at his stats, this is an old baseball saying, look at the back of the baseball card and look at his career stats. He's probably going to end up close to that. He's going to shoot better. These are good looks for Klesman for the most part. Outside of the last 3 minutes, I didn't love that portion of Klesman. I wouldn't be too worried about him, y'all. I really wouldn't. I think he's going to step out of it.
It is kind of sad that no one put him in their top 5. And that's largely due to what we saw tonight, because had he went 5 of 9, he would have been in our top 5 just because we would have won the game and it would have been, all that. But I agree. Like, he's fine. we saw Connor go through some shooting slumps at times too. And it's going to happen with shooters. That's what he brings. He does still bring defensive intensity and work ethic, which I appreciate. I'm not saying he's the best defender, but he does give it. And so, yeah, there are going to be games where he's going to make a last second shot and we're going to go crazy and be talking about how good Klesmit is. So like I said at the start of the show, and I'll say, I still like this team. In fact, I love this team. I still think there's a lot of action here, and you're going to lose games like this. This is just going to happen, and it's okay. But I'm really happy with overall, big picture, what this season is going to bring us. And partially that's just wishful thinking because our football program is in the tank right now, and I need something to go well. But I think there is really something to this team.
I do too. I really agree. You're 9 games in, you're 8-1. The offense is I think pretty for real. The defense has gotten better despite some of the issues tonight. And if you go back to the beginning of the year, we did a preview show. This is literally the type of team I said, you're going to struggle when you play a really physical front court with this team. It just is what it is. This was always going to be a difficult matchup for the Badgers. And they ran some action that was really hard to defend. You got to give them credit for that. This is a close game and they played really well.
And how many times, honestly, Ryan, are we really going to shoot 22% from 3? Like, that's another thing that just happened tonight. Like, that's probably going to be one of the worst 3-point performances we have all season, hopefully. So there's that element too. If we're shooting 35% from 3 tonight, we win the game. So I think there's, and now to be fair, so same for them. They only shot 24%. So I think there's that piece of it. But as we said, when you have a shooter, like a series on the court of all shooters, you've got guys who can shoot all over the map. Yeah, if they're all missing in a certain night, then that's just going to happen, and give credit to Michigan. But I don't think that's going to happen very often.
Yeah, the only thing I would push, and I agree with you, like the two things we talked about consistently, to stretch it even further, is you're going to struggle against physical teams in the post. And if you shoot poorly, you're probably not going to win a lot of games this year. That is the DNA of this team. It just is. This is not an elite, perfect team. We've talked about it. This team is going to lose games because of those exact reasons. However, some of the shot selection, some of the shots tonight were tougher because we weren't running very good offense, because guys weren't shooting, because Michigan was starting to tee off on Tanjay. You saw that a little bit. Michigan started sending 2 people at Tanjay, right? So part of the reason we shot poorly wasn't just because it was a bad shooting day. It was because the defense altered a little bit to us and we didn't adjust very well. Or our bigs just didn't hit shots. So it's not just, I guess it's not just a bad shooting day. It's also the impact of our bigs not playing up to their standards. And if that continues to happen, we're going to continue to have bad shooting days, I guess is my rambling answer. But yeah.
I want to put up a comment here from Mikey. He says, can't drop this one considering the next 3 on the schedule. I think this is an interesting point just because when you look at the schedule, boy, this is really the beginning of an extremely tough stretch. Obviously, starting with this weekend against our rival. And, I know some of you guys in here, Marquette fans, but we're going to win, hopefully. This is one of those things where your season can kind of take this little bit of a valley, and then people start to wonder, is we going to tank the season? Is it not going to be as good as we wanted it to be? Is this the start of, like the downfall that so many people predict Greg Gard's team will have this year? So it is an important stretch. We've got Marquette. I think we've got Illinois after that, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, this is one of those moments where we do really need to hopefully, So we have Marquette, Illinois, and then Butler. I mean, if we win 2 out of those 3, that's magnificent as far as I'm concerned. Like, those are really tough games. So, but if we lose all 4, like this one in the next 3, what is that? Where does that put us? That puts us 0-2 in the conference. It puts us really in a slump. So, Chanjay and Klesmit and these guys, we've got to find a way out of this. You've got really, really tough games. So we've hopefully got to steal a couple here. It is a beginning of a really tough stretch.
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't think you can lose all 3. If you win 1 and the others are close, I think you're fine, right? It comes a little bit back to the football point. It depends a little bit on how you look in those games. Like if they're 2-point loss and you win a tight one, then you lose a tight one against good teams. That happens in basketball. I think you'll be fine. And I think this team is going to be a little up and down because it's so dependent on shooting. But because of that, you're also going to shoot some teams out of the gym. I'm not that down on it. Hanna says Gilly is a baller. I do want to point out, because I had so many comments, Rajiv, when Gilmore, just because of the history of Gilmore, when he took threes, people throwing up their hands. He was 1 of 3 tonight. That works. Like if your defensive rotational hustle guy shooting 33% from 3, Like, you want him taking those open looks. It's part of this offense. And honestly, the form looks better. It looks a little quicker. It's pretty clean. He shot 33% tonight, 1 of 3. That's totally fine. If he gives you that every night, it's totally fine.
I mean, Gilmore has improved, and I think you'd be hard pressed to really make an argument that he hasn't improved from where he was last season. And he's more of a contributor, which is critical. By the way, all those 3 games are on the road. Yikes! I didn't realize the Illinois game was on the road. That is going to be brutal. This is a bad stretch.
We're going to wrap it up there. Rajiv, Ryan, this has been Locked On Badgers. NSD tomorrow. Let's get excited about signing a pretty.
I don't want to talk about football.
Well, they're players that haven't lost to Iowa yet. Let's focus on that. Let's get excited about signing players that haven't lost to Iowa yet. A pretty good 2025 class coming in on Wisconsin, and we will talk to y'all later.